In Dollar Tree's Plus section, they have these gorgeous large decorative cutting boards for just $3, which is going to be perfect to create this stunning high-end stencil fall decor piece. But to start off, we're gonna need to paint over this beautiful design, so say bye to it. Okay, that's enough of that. Now grab you some white paint. I'm using DIY's paint to put a nice base on here. You can use whatever paint you would like. Just put a nice base color on your board. We're gonna create a blended accent background, so we're gonna need some accent colors. Since it's fall, I'm using these. If you really want your colors to blend, grab a little spray bottle and give a little spritzy spritz on your surface, and then take your paint color and just put a minus the little gross spot that just pulled. Ew. You just need a little smoosh on here, and then take a small paintbrush and blend it right where you put that water, and just go back and forth until you notice there's no end line where the paint stops and where the paint starts. Do the same thing in another spot on the board, so there's a little bit of evenness with the dispersion of your paint colors. Spray it again if you feel like you need to move the colors around more, and apply the same technique using as many different colors as you want, keeping your main color in the background very dominant. Just lightly blend them out. You can see up close here how the water is actually moving along the board, helping to give you a really nice dispersion of that color so it's not real dark in just one section. I rotated the paint colors and kept using the spritzer to add more water as I needed to move the colors around. Use as many different colors as you would like, but keep in mind if you're going to use a different colored stencil on the front, too many background colors in your accent portion might look a little funny. You can let this dry like this if you would like. I'm going to take a napkin and just wipe back some of this excess paint. To tie in all the colors, just to make it look a little bit more cohesive, you can take some more of the paint you put in the background and put it on a brush and go over the top, dry brushing some of that color so we have pops of the deeper colors and the different tones coming through the white paint. And people, it should go without saying to make sure this is dry before you begin to stencil. For the stencil portion, we're going to use two different styles of stenciling, and we're going to start with this one first. I used some painter's tape to attach this down to our board, and the sections I don't want stenciled, I just covered over them with more painter's tape. A little tip I want to share if you struggle with bleed through on your stencils is to take a little bit of Mod Podge and put a light layer over top of the stencil. This is going to seal in the stencil and the little cracks that might be popped up, and once it's dry, you'll be able to take your paint color and stencil over the Mod Podge that's been dry, and it will help stop that bleed through. Another way to help reduce bleed through is if you have the same color in the background, you can just take that same color paint over the stencil. But since Mod Podge is clear and we have a multicolor background, this is going to be clear as it dries, allowing the color to pop through in the back along with the stencil color we're going to be painting over top of this with minimal bleed through. Another little tip, if you notice pieces of your stencil that are in the center of the stencil are popping up like this, you can hold it down with your finger, put the Mod Podge on here, and then hit it with the heat gun real quick so it dries it fast and it'll be down in place. And people, keep in mind, if you're doing this, not to keep your finger in front of the heat gun, it gets a little hot. And as you can see here, once it's all dry, our stencil is nicely attached without any gaps. For the color for this portion, I'm just going to use some black. For this first stencil, I personally want it to be a little bit rustic. So you can skip this next step if you want to, but this is too dark for me. So I'm going to knock it down a little bit by giving it a light sand. I then grabbed the second stencil and attached it with a little bit of painter's tape. There was some overhang at the bottom, so I couldn't put any down there. For the bottom portion of our stencil, I'm gonna take a little bit of my homemade texture paste and put in different sections of our bowl and add different colors to it. two different color greens, and an orange and a red. Be mindful when you're adding paints how much paint, because too much paint will actually mess up the texture paste. So little at a time, mix and then see if you need more depending on how deep you want your color. You can absolutely use whatever you want to spread out your texture paste. This is going to give us a raised stencil on top of here. I happen to have these little putty knife things in my stash. I use them, but absolutely, if you don't have fancy schmancy tools, they're not necessary for this. When you're all done, peel that stencil off the top. You are welcome to seal over this. I recommend letting it cure for at least 24 hours. Add whatever accents you would like onto the top, and you can even come back in with a little bit of paint and highlight your raised stencil if you want, adding some extra depth onto this. I love how bright this turned out. I don't usually do bright pieces, and this is just perfect. For this project, you will need a glass plate. Pay no attention to the goo that is on the back. I'm being lazy. We're not going to see that anyway. Depending on the size of your plate, grab some stencils. I'm going to cut out two different designs. Flip the plate onto the front so the back is facing us. Pick yourself a glass-friendly paint. Hold your stencil very gingerly in the spots that you want to stencil and lightly tappity tap 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 that paint color. Since we're not taping this down, it would be a really good idea if you cleaned off the stencil each time you moved it to minimize the paint bleeding under it. For the center part of the front of the plate, I'm gonna just use one of these TDS dry rub-on transfers. You could absolutely put whatever you would like in the center of your plate. This is just what I decided to go with. To tie everything together, I'm going to use a little bit of Dixie Belle's Gold Gilding Wax on the rim of the plate, and I absolutely love how this turned out. I love to do me some thrifting, and Goodwill always has some good finds in their houseware section, like this little gem I picked up a couple weeks back for just $1.99, and I gave it a little makeover with this spray paint I've been in love with lately. And then it's just kind of been sitting off on the side. So I want to share with you that if you have pieces sitting off on the side that you want to kind of put away forever, don't do it. Grab it and put a little stencil onto it to give it new life for whatever season or just everyday decor. We're going to use this stencil that I've already used before. And yes, I've been lazy and I haven't cleaned this yet. Just ignore it. You're not going to see it anyway. We're going to tape this part off. Then I'm going to grab my homemade texture paste and just leave it white. If you don't have a homemade texture paste, one of my favorite go-tos that I purchase often is Tim Holtz texture paste. I keep a link down in my description box in my Amazon affiliate store. Normally, I'd recommend that you tape your stencil down to your surface, but since our stencil completely goes over the piece, I'm just going to hold my hand here and pray we don't have a mess. You can absolutely leave your piece just like this with the raised stencil on here, or you can grab some paints, pick some colors. I decided to go with the same hue and add some highlights coming up from the bottom of the pumpkin and just create some little shaded areas. And on a side note, I would recommend waiting until your paste is completely dry, but I didn't have that kind of time, so I shaded this while mine was partially dry, and it still turned out okay. For a little bit of contrast, I grabbed this metallic paint and I went over the stems and some of the little vine sections. To tie everything together, I dry brushed some of my white paint all over the whole piece. For this stencil decor piece, grab one of Dollar Tree's chargers. Pick a stencil, paint color. People, look how cute this little baby makeup sponge is. I'm about to go buy all the baby makeup sponges when I find out wherever they came from, because those were given to me. Taping this down with some painter's tape was a little difficult because there were some spots that were raised around the edges. So in an attempt to combat that, you'll notice as I take our little baby sponge with a smoosh of black paint on here, that I'm taking my hand and pressing it in different sections on the stencil as I go. This is just trying to press those gaps completely into our charger so we can minimize the paint smooshing underneath that stencil and causing a mess. Once this is all dry, if you want to put a layer of sealer over it, go right ahead. I absolutely love how creative and gorgeous this turned out, and it was super easy to do. Mackenzie Childs is a style I am asked to dupe often, and I dupe a lot of things. This is actually going to be my first time trying to recreate this style, and we're going to do it on some wood pumpkins. I purchased these cool pieces from the Restore for only 50 cents. You could cut up some scrap wood pieces as well for these ideas. Dollar Tree also has little round pieces that you can pick up. Walmart has these amazing live edge pieces you can grab. And another cool idea would be to take these little shadow boxes from Dollar Tree and turn them into pumpkins too. We are going to be doing several different things to these pumpkins, so we're going to need to start off by creating a nice base. So I'm just taking some of my DIY paint in the beadboard color and going over all of these 2 times. For the stems, I'm going to use these old knobs I thrifted. I do want the knobs gold, so I'm going to use some of Dixie Belle's gold gilding wax to obtain that color. If you don't have this stuff, Rub and Buff is a good alternative. It will also change colors to metals. I did not have any buffalo check or checkered napkins or decoupage paper in my stash anywhere, and I don't have the patience that some crafters do to paint my own design like that, but I did have this TDS decoupage paper design in my stash, and I figured this would do the trick. So I cut 2 different sections to apply one whole piece of the TDS decoupage paper onto the large pumpkin and then a smaller section, and just did half of the small pumpkin, and I made the paper go the opposite way. On the other pumpkin, because we got 3 of those joints, I just took some purple paint and some painter's tape and created some background lines. For the first stencil on the first pumpkin, we're going to use this paint color to take a damask stencil and just do a portion of the pumpkin that we put the purple lines on. For the tall pumpkin that we applied the TDS decoupage paper to the entire piece, we're just taking 1 leaf stencil and we're putting 3 different designs at the top. Right here, I am marking the stencil in place because before I actually put the stencil down, I'm gonna take some gold gilding wax, and you could absolutely use some metallic gold paint for this, and tracing around where I made those marks. So when we lay that color down in the stencil, we'll have some gold popping out around it. On our third pumpkin that we applied half the TDS decoupage paper to, we're gonna take a damask stencil and apply half of a design in pink for a little pop. We're gonna use some super glue, Gorilla Glue Gel. I love this stuff, it's my favorite, to attach our knobs. And then once these are dry, I put them off to dry for a couple hours. I grabbed a permanent black marker to add some accents around those stencils, to add some highlights, some little dots, some extra bits, some lines. And I took more of that gold gilding wax, went around the edges of the pumpkin, and added some ribbon on some of the pumpkins just to kind of tie everything in and give this whole vibe some extra life. For this fall stencil DIY, I have two ideas. First, you'll need a wood piece. I grabbed this from the Restore for 50 cents, and then a stencil. You can remix this idea with a scrap wood piece or one of Dollar Tree's large wood planks. Make sure that you tape the stencil down and grab a paint color. I'm just going to use black and keep this nice and modern. When you're all done tappity tap tap tapping your stencil into place, once it's dry, you're welcome to put a sealer over it if you would like and use it as some beautiful tabletop decor. Or you could grab some knobs that you have from your stash, add them to the front of your piece, hang it by your door, and then you have an amazing little spot to hang your scarf, hang a little sweater, or your keys for the fall season. If you enjoyed these fall DIYs, check out this video right here for more inspiration. As always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, and until next time.